"Excuse me, you need to move." The words cut through first class like a blade. A white woman looms over seat 2A, dripping with entitlement, while a 12-year-old black boy looks up boarding pass, trembling in his hand. Her designer bag spills across his armrest like ownership itself. "This is my seat," she declares loud enough for everyone to hear. Passengers glance away, some in discomfort, others in disbelief. What she doesn't know, what no one yet realizes, is that the boy's father is sitting just a few rows behind watching. And when he stands, she'll discover that she hasn't just stolen a seat, she's challenged the man who owns the entire airline. Welcome back to Black and Bruised Stories. If you're new here, you've just joined a community dedicated to truth, justice, and survival. Show some love by clicking the like and subscribe button. Before we dive deeper into this story, drop a comment where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. The tension in the cabin is thick enough to choke on. 24 passengers in first class, and every single one can feel the electricity crackling through the air. Conversations die mid-sentence. Laptops close magazines, lowered phones emerge from pockets and purses as passengers realize they're witnessing something that needs to be documented. Something that will either restore their faith in humanity or shatter it completely. The boy, Jonathan Miles, though the woman will never bother to learn his name, looks up at this wall of hostility towering over him. His voice when it comes is soft but clear, carrying the kind of dignity that adults spend lifetimes trying to cultivate. "Ma'am, this is my seat." He holds up his boarding pass with trembling fingers. "Seat 2A first class. My dad bought this ticket for me." She snatches the pass from his hands with the casual cruelty of someone who has never learned that other people's feelings matter. One glance, barely a glance, before she tosses it back like it's contaminated with something infectious. "Mistakes happen, sweetie. Obviously, someone felt sorry for you and upgraded you by accident. This is first class. You need to sit in the back where you belong." The words hit like physical blows. Where you belong. For words carrying centuries of discrimination, generations of exclusion, the ugly DNA of prejudice that still pulses through American society, despite decades of progress and protest. The phrase hangs in the recycled cabin air like poison gas, making decent passengers literally recoil in their leather seats. But this woman, let's call her Karen, because the internet will soon make her the poster child for entitled racism isn't done. Oh no, she's just getting started. She plops herself down in seat 2A, with theatrical flair spreading her belongings across both armrests like a dog marking territory. Her designer coat claims the window seat. Her oversized purse colonizes the boy's space. She's establishing dominance through sheer force of entitlement. "Listen, honey," she continues, settling into stolen comfort with obvious satisfaction. "I fly first class every week. I know how this works. Someone made a mistake with your ticket. Probably felt charitable or something, but that doesn't mean you actually belong here. The flight attendants will sort this out once they realize what's happened." Jonathan stands frozen in the aisle, his boarding pass clutched against his chest like armor that's already failed to protect him. Around him, the cabin's energy shifts and builds like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Passengers are no longer pretending to mind their own business. This has moved beyond simple seating dispute into something much more serious, much more damaging. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, 73 years old and occupying seat 3B, looks up from her crossword puzzle with growing alarm. She lived through the civil rights era, marched with Dr. King, and recognizes the ugly sound of discrimination when it raises its voice in public. Her weathered hands grip her puzzle book tighter as memories flood back. Lunch counters and bus boycott, separate water fountains, and colored-only sections. She thought those days were behind them. She was wrong. In seat 1A, businessman Robert Chin pauses in reviewing his presentation slides. As an Asian American executive who climbed corporate ladders while fighting his own battles against workplace prejudice, he understands the corrosive power of assumptions based on appearance. His jaw tightens as he watches a child endure what no human being should face in 2025. Near the window, Dr. Sarah Ahmad adjusts her medical conference materials with shaking hands. As a pediatric surgeon, she's trained to recognize distress in children. What she sees in Jonathan's face, the careful control masking genuine hurt, makes her heart ache with protective fury. This boy is handling more pressure with more grace than most adults could muster. But it's the phones that truly mark this as a moment destined for infamy. In our interconnected world, injustice doesn't happen in darkness anymore. It happens under the harsh fluorescent light of viral media, recorded in high definition, ready to be shared with a world hungry for either justice or outrage. The first device emerges when Karen raises her voice. Then another. Within 30 seconds, nearly a dozen phones are discreetly pointed in their direction, fingers hovering over record buttons as passengers realize they're witnessing something that will either go viral for all the right reasons or all the wrong ones. Karen notices the cameras and actually smiles, seemingly pleased to have an audience for what she believes is her righteous stand against airline incompetence. In her warped worldview, she's the hero of this story, a paying customer standing up for standards, maintaining order, ensuring that rules are followed. The idea that she might be wrong, that she might be the villain in this narrative, never crosses her mind. The boy's eyes fill with tears, but he doesn't cry. Instead, he does something extraordinary, something that will later be shared millions of times across social media as an example of grace under pressure. He straightens his shoulders, takes a deep breath, and speaks with quiet authority that would make his father proud. "Ma'am, I have my boarding pass right here. My dad bought this ticket for me because I earned straight A's this year. I studied hard all semester, and this trip is my reward. I belong in this seat because my father paid for it and because I'm a human being who deserves to be treated with respect." The words come out steady and clear, carrying a dignity that makes Karen's cruelty seem even more monstrous by comparison. Here's a 12-year-old child teaching an adult woman about basic human decency, about the fundamental principles of fairness that she apparently never learned. Karen laughs, actually laughs, as if the very idea is absurd. The sound is harsh and ugly, cutting through the cabin like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Your dad? Oh, sweetie, I'm sure your dad is very nice, but he doesn't understand how first class works. This is for business people, for important people, for people who matter in the real world. You'll learn someday when you're older." The condescension in her voice is like acid burning through any pretense of civility. She's not just refusing to move. She's delivering a masterclass in prejudice, teaching a young boy that his worth is determined by the color of his skin, rather than the content of his character or the validity of his ticket. Around them, the cabin erupts in whispers. Passengers exchange horrified glances, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust to barely contained fury. A grandmother shakes her head in disbelief. A businessman mutters something that sounds suspiciously like profanity. A young mother covers her children's ears, not wanting them to hear such naked hatred. But 3 rows back in seat 5A, someone has been watching this entire exchange with the careful attention of a man who spent decades reading people's situations and power dynamics. David Miles Foe, and majority owner of Miles Aviation Group, the parent company that owns this very airline, has been observing his son handle one of life's cruelest lessons with remarkable composure. David had chosen to sit 3 rows behind Jonathan deliberately. This was his son's first solo first-class experience, a reward for academic excellence, and David wanted the boy to feel independent and capable. He'd watched with pride as Jonathan organized his belongings, studied the safety card, and settled into his seat with the wonder of someone experiencing luxury for the first time. But now, his parental instincts are wearing with his executive training. Every fiber of his being wants to intervene to protect his child from this assault on his dignity. But he also knows that Jonathan needs to learn how to stand up for himself, how to face adversity with grace, and how to maintain his composure when the world shows its ugly face. The moment of decision approaches. How much should a father let his son endure in the name of character building? When does protecting become enabling? And when does teaching become negligence? Karen, oblivious to the gathering storm 3 rows behind her, continues her performance. "I'm not trying to be mean, but we all know what's probably happening here. Someone made a mistake, probably felt sorry for them, and now we're all supposed to pretend this is normal. But rules are rules, and I didn't pay thousands of dollars for first class to have my flight disrupted by charity cases. The phrase charity cases lands like a bomb. Even passengers who had been trying to stay neutral gasp audibly. This isn't just discrimination anymore, it's dehumanization, reducing a child to a category and inconvenience. A problem to be solved. Jonathan stands taller, and when he speaks again, his voice carries strength that seems to come from somewhere deep within his family's legacy of perseverance. I'm not a charity case, ma'am. I'm a student who worked hard for good grades. I'm a son whose father saved money to create special memories with me. I'm a human being who deserves the same respect you'd want for yourself or your own children. His words ring through the cabin with the clarity of truth spoken by innocence. But Karen's so invested in her narrative of superiority, so committed to her role as the wrong party, doubles down on her cruelty. Don't lecture me about respect, young man. Respect is earned, and it's earned by understanding your place in the world. Your place isn't in first class. Your place is in the back with people more like you. That's it. The line is crossed. The moment David Miles has been dreading, and perhaps unconsciously preparing for, has arrived. His son has shown remarkable strength and dignity, but no child should have to endure this level of abuse. It's time for Dad to step in. But when David Miles intervenes, Karen is about to learn that demanding to speak to someone in charge sometimes gives you exactly what you asked for, and more than you bargained for. This woman has no idea who she's dealing with. And when the truth comes out, your jaw is going to hit the floor. This is just the beginning of one of the most incredible stories of instant karma you'll ever witness. Make sure you're subscribed because you absolutely cannot miss what happens next. If you were on this plane watching this unfold, what would be your breaking point? Would you immediately speak up to defend Jonathan, or would you wait to see how his father handled the situation? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know where you draw the line on intervening in situations like this. Sarah Martinez, 15-year veteran flight attendant, has been watching this situation develop from the galley with growing concern. In her decade and a half of service, she's diffused drunk passengers, calmed crying babies, handled medical emergencies, and even talked down a would-be hijacker. But this feels different. This feels like watching a social media firestorm being born in real time. She approaches the row with the diplomatic smile that's been perfected through thousands of difficult conversations, her training kicking in, as she prepares to navigate what is clearly a powder keg waiting to explode. Good afternoon, folks. I'm Sarah, and I'll be taking care of first class today. Is everything all right here? Can I help resolve any seating concerns? Karen immediately pounces on the opportunity like a predator spotting wounded prey. Finally, official airline intervention that will validate her position and restore what she sees as the proper order of the universe. Thus, thank goodness you're here. Karen's voice drips with exaggerated relief. This young man is sitting in my seat. And there's obviously been some terrible mix-up with his ticket. I always fly first class. You can check your records if you want, and I know this isn't right. I'm sure it's not his fault, she adds with theatrical sympathy. But we need to get this sorted out before takeoff. She speaks with such confidence, such absolute certainty, that for a moment even Sarah seems to hesitate. This is exactly how systemic prejudice perpetuates itself. It wraps itself in the clothing of authority, speaks with a voice of experience, and relies on others' reluctance to challenge what sounds like reasonable concern. But Jonathan, this remarkable 12-year-old, isn't backing down. He extends his boarding pass to Sarah with steady hands, his voice clear and respectful, despite the emotional assault he's enduring. Ma'am, this is my ticket. Seat 2A, first class. My dad bought it for me because I got straight A's this year. We're flying to New York together for a father-son trip. Everything is correct. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Sarah examines the boarding pass with the practiced eye of someone who's seen every possible ticket configuration. First class seat 2A, properly issued, fully paid, no upgrades or special codes. Everything is completely legitimate, exactly as it should be. She looks at Karen expectantly. Ma'am, I'll need to see your boarding pass as well, please. For just a moment, the briefest flicker of time uncertainty crosses Karen's face, but her commitment to being right is stronger than her capacity for self-reflection. She fumbles through her oversized purse with theatrical indignation, finally producing her boarding pass with a flourish that suggests she's about to prove her point definitively. Sarah looks at the ticket, and her expression changes subtly. Economy class seat, 23B middle seat, between two strangers. The truth is now undeniable and embarrassing. But Karen's reaction to this revelation will determine whether this situation can be resolved quietly or will explode into something much larger. Ma'am, Sarah says with careful diplomacy, your assigned seat is actually in economy class, seat 23B. This young man's ticket is completely valid for seat 2A in first class. The words hang in the air like a challenge to everything Karen believes about how the world should work. Faced with irrefutable evidence that she's wrong, that Jonathan belongs exactly where he's sitting, she has a choice. Accept the truth gracefully and retreat to her assigned seat, or double down on her prejudice and reveal herself for who she truly is. Karen chooses to double down with spectacular determination. That's impossible, she declares, her voice rising to a level that attracts attention from passengers throughout the cabin. There's been a massive mistake. I always fly first class. Always. I have platinum status. I have elite privileges. I have connections in this industry. Check your computer. Check the passenger manifest. Check with your supervisor. This boy cannot possibly have a legitimate first-class ticket. The other passengers are no longer even pretending to mind their own business. The mask has completely fallen away, and they're witnessing raw, unfiltered discrimination in real time. Mrs. Patterson gasps audibly. Robert Chin shakes his head in disgust. Dr. Ahmad is now openly recording on her phone, her medical training having taught her to document incidents that might require later testimony. Karen notices the phones and seems energized by the attention rather than chastened by it. In her mind, she's building a case gathering witnesses for what she believes will vindicate her position. Look, I don't want to make this about race. She begins using the classic opening line of someone about to make everything about race. But let's be realistic here. This is first class. These tickets cost thousands of dollars. Do you honestly think this boy's family can afford this? I mean, really look at him. She gestures dismissively at Jonathan as if he's not standing right there absorbing every cruel word. I'm not trying to be mean, but we all know what's probably happening here. Someone made a mistake. Probably felt sorry for them. Maybe there was some kind of diversity initiative or charity program, and now we're all supposed to pretend this is normal business practice. The silence that follows is deafening. Even the aircraft engines seem to quiet, as if the entire plane is holding its breath in horror at what they're witnessing. This isn't just about a seat anymore. This is about dignity, about respect, about the fundamental belief that a person's worth isn't determined by their skin color or their appearance. Jonathan's response is nothing short of extraordinary. Any adult would have been forgiven for losing their temper, for shouting, for matching Karen's aggression with justified anger. But this child, this incredible young man, simply stands straighter and speaks with quiet dignity that cuts through her hatred like a lighthouse beam through fog. Ma'am, my father works very hard for our family. He started his own company when I was little, and he's built it into something successful through years of dedication and sacrifice. He saved money for this trip because it's important to him that we create good memories together. I'm not in anyone's way. I'm not taking anything that doesn't belong to me. I just want to sit in the seat that my dad paid for so we can enjoy our time together. His words are simple, but they carry the weight of generations. How many times had his ancestors been told they didn't belong somewhere? How many times had they been forced to prove their right to exist in certain spaces? And here is this young boy, carrying on that legacy of dignified resistance with the grace of someone 3 times his age. The passengers around them are visibly moved. Mrs. Patterson, who lived through the civil rights era, feels tears welling up in her eyes. Robert Chin is reminded of his own grandfather's stories about discrimination against Chinese immigrants. Dr. Ahmad thinks about her own children and how she would want them to handle such a situation. But Karen isn't moved. If anything, she seems more determined to assert her perceived superiority, as if Jonathan's eloquent response has somehow threatened her worldview even more. "Look, sweetheart," she says with venomous condescension, "I'm sure your father is a lovely man who works very hard at whatever he does. But this is about more than just money. First class is for business travelers, for people who understand how this world really works, for people who have earned their place through years of professional achievement. You'll be much happier in economy class with people who are more appropriate for your background." The word appropriate lands like a slap. She might as well have used more explicit racial language. The meaning is crystal clear to everyone listening. In her mind, Jonathan is inherently inappropriate for first class, not because of anything he has done or failed to do, but because of who he is. That's when the passengers begin to find their voices. Mrs. Patterson is the first to speak up, her voice shaking with righteous indignation that spans decades of social justice advocacy. "Young lady, that child has every right to be here. His ticket is valid. His behavior is exemplary, and frankly, your conduct is absolutely disgraceful. You should be ashamed of yourself, and your parents should be ashamed of how they raised you." Robert Chin joins in his business executive training, helping him articulate the situation with legal precision. "Ma'am, you're creating a hostile environment for a minor passenger who has done nothing wrong. The boy has his assigned seat. You have yours. This harassment needs to stop immediately, or we're going to have bigger problems than seating arrangements. Doctor." Ahmed's voice carries the authority of someone accustomed to being heard in life or death situations. This is harassment and discrimination, pure and simple. You're traumatizing a child based on your own prejudices, and it's completely unacceptable. I'm a mandated reporter, and I'm documenting everything for the authorities. Even passengers from economy class are craning their necks to see what's happening. Word spreading through the aircraft like wildfire. Flight attendants from other sections are gathering, sensing that something significant is occurring that might require coordinated intervention. But Karen, rather than being chastened by the unanimous disapproval, seems to interpret it as proof that she's the real victim in this situation. In her mind, she's being ganged up on for simply trying to maintain standards, for insisting that rules be followed, for standing up for what's right. "I can't believe this," she declares, her voice reaching a pitch that makes nearby passengers wince. "I'm the one being attacked here. I'm just trying to sit in the correct seat, and now everyone is acting like I'm some kind of monster. This is reverse discrimination. This is exactly what's wrong with society today. People bending over backward to be politically correct instead of just following basic common sense. The irony is staggering. Here's a woman sitting in someone else's seat accusing the rightful occupant of displacement, claiming victimhood while actively victimizing a child. But Karen has crossed the point of no return. She's so invested in being right, so committed to her narrative of persecution, that admitting error would require her to acknowledge that her entire worldview is fundamentally flawed. "Fine," she announces with theatrical finality, her voice now loud enough to be heard throughout the aircraft. "I want to speak to someone in charge. Get me the pilot. Get me a supervisor. Get me the SEO if you have to. This is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not going to be bullied by political correctness. That boy doesn't belong in first class, and everyone here knows it, even if they're too afraid to say so." Her demand to speak to someone in charge echoes through the cabin like a challenge to the universe itself. She's called for the manager, demanded the supervisor, and insisted on speaking to the person with real authority. And sometimes, when you make such demands, the universe has a sense of humor about giving you exactly what you asked for. Because 3 rows back, the man who is truly in charge has been watching his son handle this crisis with more maturity and grace than Karen has shown in her entire adult life. David Miles has remained silent, not out of indifference, but out of respect for his son's independence and dignity. He wanted Jonathan to learn that he could stand up for himself, that his worth wasn't dependent on his father's intervention. But Karen's escalating cruelty and her explicit demand for higher authority has crossed a line that requires parental and executive action. The moment for quiet observation is over. It's time for Karen to meet someone in charge. It's time for her to learn that when you judge people by their appearance, when you make assumptions based on prejudice, when you demand to speak to the manager, sometimes you get exactly what you asked for and more than you bargained for. Karen just demanded to speak to someone in charge, and you will absolutely not believe who's about to step forward. This is about to become one of the most epic examples of instant karma ever caught on camera. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. At what point should other passengers have physically intervened to protect Jonathan? Do you think they did enough by speaking up, or should someone have taken more direct action? Share your thoughts. This is fascinating psychology about bystander intervention. The moment of reckoning has arrived. Throughout this escalating confrontation, David Miles has remained seated in 5A, watching his son navigate one of life's most difficult lessons with remarkable composure. As CEO of Miles Aviation Group, David has faced boardroom battles that would crush lesser executives, survived hostile takeovers that destroyed careers, and built a billion-dollar empire from nothing but determination and vision. But watching his 12-year-old son endure racist attacks from an entitled stranger is testing his self-control in ways that no corporate challenge ever has. Every paternal instinct screams at him to intervene, to protect, to unleash the full power of his position on this woman who dares to attack his child. Yet he also recognizes the value of this painful lesson. Jonathan needs to learn that he can stand up for himself, that his worth isn't dependent on his father's title or wealth. The balance between protection and empowerment is delicate, but Karen's demand to speak to someone in charge has tipped the scales. It's time for David Miles to step into the light. He closes his MacBook Pro with deliberate precision. The soft click audible even over the cabin's ambient noise and Karen's continued ranting around him. Passengers who have been following the confrontation with growing unease turn to see who's moving. There's something about David's presence that commands attention even before he speaks. A natural authority that makes people take notice without him having to demand it. At 6'2", David Miles moves through the aircraft aisle with the fluid confidence of someone who has never doubted his right to be anywhere he chooses to go. His custom-tailored navy suit is cut by Huntsman of Savile Row, the same tailor who dresses heads of state and royalty. His Italian leather shoes, handcrafted by Berludi, make soft sounds against the aircraft floor. His PC Philippe Nautilus, a $40,000 timepiece that appreciates in value faster than most people's annual salaries, catches the cabin light as he approaches his son. But it's not his expensive accessories that make passengers turn and stare. It's his presence itself, the unmistakable aura of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room he enters, yet comfortable enough with that power to wield it with restraint and dignity. This is a man who has learned that true authority whispers while insecurity shouts. He places a gentle but firm hand on Jonathan's shoulder, and the transformation in his son is immediate and visible. Jonathan's shoulders relax. His breathing steadies. His posture straightens with renewed confidence. This is his father, his hero, his protector, the man who taught him that real strength isn't about dominating others, but about standing firm in your principles while treating everyone with respect. Jonathan David says softly, his voice carrying the warmth of unconditional paternal love and the steel of a man who has built an empire through sheer force of will and intellect. "Everything all right, son?" The question is somewhat rhetorical. David has heard every word of the confrontation from his seat 3 rows back. But he wants to give Jonathan the chance to explain the situation in his own words, to practice articulating injustice in clear terms, to continue learning how to advocate for himself even when help is available. "Dad," this lady says, "I can't sit in our seats. She says there was a mistake with my ticket and that I don't belong in first class. She won't listen to the flight attendant or look at my boarding pass properly." Jonathan speaks clearly, no longer the vulnerable child Karen had tried to intimidate. With his father beside him, he's part of a team, part of something larger and stronger than any prejudice this woman could throw at him. David Miles looks at Karen for the first time, his gaze steady and evaluating. He's not angry, Anger is a luxury he can't afford in his position, where every word might be recorded and every action scrutinized. Instead, he's disappointed the way someone might be disappointed to discover that humanity still has so far to go in learning basic decency. His eyes take in everything about Karen in a single comprehensive glance. The expensive clothes that scream nouveau riche rather than old money. The defensive posture of someone who uses aggression to mask deep insecurity. The fake tan and designer accessories that suggest someone trying desperately to project status they don't naturally possess. In his business, David has learned to read people quickly and accurately. What he sees in Karen is someone whose sense of self-worth is so fragile that she needs to tear others down to feel elevated. "Ma'am," he says, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that makes Fortune 500s stop mid-sentence in board meetings and causes trading floors to fall silent when he speaks. "That is my son. Those are our seats. I'd appreciate it if you'd move to your assigned location so we can all get on with our day. The request is polite, professional, and absolutely non-negotiable. This isn't a debate or a discussion. It's a directive from someone accustomed to being obeyed without question." But Karen, blinded by her prejudices and emboldened by what she perceives as successful intimidation of a child, makes the catastrophic error of doubling down on her aggression. She looks up at this tall, impeccably dressed black man and feels something she's not used to experiencing. Genuine uncertainty. Every visual cue screams success and authority. The custom suit that costs more than her monthly rent. The watch that could fund a luxury vacation. The confident bearing that suggests someone very accustomed to having his words carry weight. But her racism is stronger than her survival instincts. Instead of recognizing the obvious signs of power and backing down gracefully, she sees only what her prejudice allows her to see. "Oh, so now Daddy shows up," she says, with venomous sarcasm that makes several passengers visibly cringe and reach for their phones to ensure they're recording this spectacular display of ignorance. How convenient. "Look, I don't care if you bought these tickets, won them in some lottery, or got them through some diversity program. This is first class. This is for business people, for professionals, for people who actually matter in the real world." The words hang in the air like toxic gas poisoning the atmosphere with their casual cruelty. She's speaking to a man whose business acumen and professional achievements dwarf her own by orders of magnitude, whose company probably generates more revenue in a week than she'll see in her lifetime. Yet she can't see past the color of his skin to recognize his obvious success. "I don't know what kind of game you people are playing here." She continues, her voice rising with each word as she becomes more emboldened by what she mistakes for an audience of supporters, but I'm not falling for it. First class has standards, and those standards exist for very good reasons. I've been flying first class for years, and I know exactly how this system works. This is not how legitimate passengers behave. The cabin has gone dead silent except for the soft sound of phone cameras recording what will soon become one of the most viral examples of instant karma in internet history. Passengers can't believe what they're hearing. Here's a woman confronted by a man who radiates success and authority, who speaks with the quiet confidence of genuine power, and she's still doubling down on her discrimination. It's like watching someone pour gasoline on a fire, completely oblivious to the inevitable explosion. David Miles smiles. Not a happy smile, but the kind of smile that should serve as a warning to anyone with basic survival instincts. It's the smile of a predator who has been underestimated. The expression of someone who has faced racism throughout his career and learned exactly how to turn it into a teachable moment. He's encountered people like Karen before. Individuals so blinded by their own prejudices that they can't recognize competence, success, or authority when it stands directly in front of them wearing a $40,000 suit. "Ma'am," he says, his voice never rising above conversational level, but somehow filling the entire cabin with its quiet authority. "I'm going to ask you one more time very politely to move to your assigned seat so my son can sit down and we can all continue with what should be a pleasant flight." Karen laughs. actually laughs, as if the entire situation is some kind of elaborate practical joke being played at her expense. The sound is harsh and grating, cutting through the cabin's tense silence like fingernails on a chalkboard. Or what she challenges, her voice dripping with false bravado as she settles more firmly into the stolen seat. You'll call a lawyer. You'll file a complaint with the airline. You'll write a bad review on social media. You'll contact the NYACP. She's enjoying this now, feeding off what she perceives as an audience for her performance. In her mind, she's the star of her own reality show. The brave defender of standards, standing up to what she sees as reverse discrimination and special treatment. Listen, mister, whatever your name is, she continues with deliberate disrespect. I've been flying first class longer than your son has been alive. I know how this system works. I know who belongs here and who doesn't. And I know the difference between legitimate passengers and charity cases. The airline made a mistake. Probably some computer glitch, or maybe someone in customer service got overly generous with upgrades. But either way, we need to fix this before it becomes an even bigger problem. She gestures around the cabin as if appealing to her fellow passengers for support, completely oblivious to the fact that every face is looking at her with expressions ranging from horror to anticipation. Everyone here knows I'm right, even if they're too politically correct to say it out loud. First class isn't charity. It's not a diversity program. It's not a social experiment. It's for people who've earned their place through hard work, professional success, and understanding how the real world operates. The irony is absolutely staggering. She's lecturing about hard work and professional success to a man whose achievements make her own career look like a weekend hobby. Yet she can't see it because her prejudice acts like a filter, blocking out any information that contradicts her preconceived notions about who deserves what based on skin color. David Miles reaches into his jacket pocket not for a lawyer's card, not for a complaint form, but for something much more powerful and infinitely more devastating to Karen's worldview, his company phone. The device that connects directly to the operational control center of one of America's largest aviation companies. The phone that can ground flights, reroute aircraft, and make executive decisions that affect thousands of passengers and millions of dollars daily. He dials a number he knows by heart, a number that bypasses all customer service protocols and connects directly to the people who really run the airline industry. As he waits for the connection, he maintains that same calm smile that's beginning to make intelligent passengers very nervous about what's coming next. "This is David," he says, simply when the call connects his voice, carrying the casual authority of someone who never has to explain who he is when he calls his own company. "We have a situation on Flight 447 first class cabin. I need you to patch me through to Captain Rodriguez immediately and have ground operations standing by for my instructions." Karen's smirk falters slightly. Something about his tone, about the casual authority with which he made that call, about the way he spoke like someone accustomed to giving orders rather than taking them, sends a chill down her spine. But she's gone too far to back down now, investing too much of her ego in this confrontation to simply surrender. "Calling your connections won't change anything," she says. But her voice has lost some of its earlier confidence and taken on a slightly shrill quality that suggests growing desperation. "Rules are rules, and I don't care who you think you know in this industry." Within 30 seconds, David's phone rings with a distinctive tone reserved for priority calls from his operations center. The conversation that follows will be brief, professional, and absolutely devastating to Karen's rapidly crumbling worldview. "Captain Rodriguez? Yes, this is David Miles. We're having a passenger dispute in first class seat 2A. No emergency, but I need you to contact ground operations and have security standing by for passenger removal." "Yes, that David Miles. Thank you. I'll see you shortly." He hangs up and looks at Karen with that same disappointed expression, like a teacher watching a student fail a test they should have easily passed. Around them, the first whispers of recognition begin to ripple through the cabin as passengers start connecting. They should have seen much earlier. Ma'am, you wanted to speak to someone in charge? Someone will be here shortly to escort you to your correct seat. That's when the rail investigation begins. Passengers throughout first class pull out their phones, not just to record the confrontation, but to search. Fingers fly across screens as the name David Miles gets typed into Google search bars across the cabin. The results that begin loading will change everything Karen thinks she knows about this situation. Robert Chin in seat 1A is the first to find it. His eyes widen as he reads the search results on his phone screen. Forbes list Fortune 500 aviation industry leader, billionaire entrepreneur. He leans over to his seatmate and whispers something that makes her gasp audibly and immediately start her own search. Mrs. Patterson in 3B is next her weathered fingers, surprisingly nimble on her smartphone screen. She looks at her phone, then at David, then back at her phone, her mouth falling open in amazement as the magnitude of Karen's mistake becomes clear. Dr. Ahmad, near the window, has already found his LinkedIn profile, his company website, and 3 recent news articles about Miles Aviation Group's latest acquisition. She's a surgeon accustomed to life and death situations. But even she's stunned by the cosmic scale of Karen's miscalculation. But Karen, still oblivious to the digital investigation happening around her, continues her spectacular self-destruction. She seems to interpret the passenger's phone activity as support for her position, validation of her outrage. See, everyone is documenting this travesty. This is what happens when airlines abandon their standards and start letting anyone sit anywhere they want. This is what political correctness gets you. Chaos, confusion, and paying customers being treated like second-class citizens in favor of diversity initiatives. She stands up in the aisle, now emboldened by what she mistakes for an audience of allies, her voice rising to address the entire first-class cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing here is the breakdown of basic order and common sense. I pay premium prices for premium service, and I refuse to be intimidated into giving up my rights by people who don't understand how the real world works. It's a masterclass in missing the room. A perfect example of someone so blinded by their own prejudice that they can't read the obvious signs that they've made a catastrophic error. Every face around her shows not support, but anticipation. The kind of expression people get when they're about to witness someone receive their comeuppance in spectacular fashion. The passengers are starting to figure out who David Miles really is. And when Karen finds out her world is about to come crashing down in the most spectacular way possible. You absolutely have to subscribe right now because this revelation is going to be legendary. Would you have kept calm like David Miles, letting the situation play out to teach both his son and this woman a lesson? Or would you have revealed your identity immediately to shut down the harassment? What's the better approach for handling prejudice? The whispers are spreading through first class like wildfire, creating a buzz of excitement that has nothing to do with takeoff preparations. Passengers are leaning across aisles, sharing their phone screens, their expressions shifting from shock to amazement to anticipation. The name David Miles is being passed from row to row like a secret that's too explosive to keep quiet. CEO of Miles Aviation Group Robert Chin whispers urgently to the passenger behind him. Net worth over $2 billion, Dr. Ahmad murmurs to her seatmate, showing the Forbes article on her screen. He owns this airline, Mrs. Patterson says in amazement to anyone with an earshot. That man owns the plane we're sitting on. But Karen remains blissfully, catastrophically unaware of the gathering storm. She's too busy performing for what she believes is her audience, too invested in her narrative of victimhood to notice that every face around her is looking at her with a mixture of horror and fascination, the way people watch a car accident unfold in slow motion. She turns back to David with renewed aggression, seemingly energized by what she mistakes for passenger support. I hope you understand that your little intimidation tactic isn't going to work. I've been flying for 20 years, and I know my rights. You can call whoever you want, but the facts are the facts. This boy doesn't belong in first class, and no amount of political posturing is going to change that. David's smile widens slightly, but there's something almost predatory about it now. He's been underestimated his entire career by racist college professors who assumed he'd never make it past his freshman year, by bigoted business partners who thought they could shortchange him, by competitors who dismissed him as an affirmative action hire. He's learned to savor these moments when prejudice meets reality. When assumptions crash headfirst into facts, "Ma'am," he says with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a particularly slow child, "I'm curious. What exactly do you think my son and I need to do to prove we belong in first class? Should we show you our tax returns, our bank statements, our business degrees, our property deeds?" Karen senses something shifting in the cabin's atmosphere, but misinterprets it as validation of her position. "I think you need to accept that mistakes happen and stop trying to take advantage of airline errors. The honest thing to do would be to admit that you don't actually belong here and move to your correct seats without causing a scene." That's when the cabin door at the front of first class opens and Captain Maria Rodriguez herself appears. Not the standard protocol for seating disputes, but then again, this isn't a standard situation. Behind her are two airline security officers and someone in a crisp airline uniform with multiple stripes indicating senior management. Captain Rodriguez, a 25-year veteran who's flown heads of state and foreign dignitaries, approaches with obvious respect and perhaps a hint of apology in her expression. The other passengers watch in fascination as she stops directly in front of David Miles. "Mr. Miles," she says clearly, her voice carrying enough to be heard throughout the cabin. "I'm terribly sorry about the situation. We'll have it resolved immediately." The effect is like dropping a bomb in the middle of the cabin. The whispered conversations stop abruptly. Every passenger turns to stare at David with new understanding. And Karen, poor oblivious Karen, finally begins to sense that something fundamental has shifted in the dynamics of this confrontation. "Mr. Miles," she repeats, confusion creeping into her voice for the first time. Why is she calling you Mr. Miles? And why is the captain here for a seating dispute? Captain Rodriguez looks at Karen with the kind of professional composure that barely masks profound disappointment. "Ma'am, you've been harassing David Miles, the CEO and majority owner of Miles Aviation Group, the parent company that owns this airline. You're sitting in a seat belonging to his son. And frankly, your behavior has been completely unacceptable." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. The color drains from her face as the magnitude of her mistake begins to penetrate her consciousness. This isn't just any angry father she's been battling. This is the owner of the airline, the man who signs the paychecks of everyone around her, the person who could ban her from flying permanently with a single phone call. That's impossible," she whispers, but her voice cracks like thin ice under pressure. "He can't be. I mean, how was I supposed to know? But the evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. Captain Rodriguez's difference, the security officer's respectful distance, the senior manager taking notes of every word, all of it points to one inescapable conclusion. Karen has picked a fight with quite possibly the worst person on the entire aircraft to antagonize. David Miles maintains his calm composure, though there's definitely satisfaction in his voice when he speaks. "Ma'am, you weren't supposed to know who I am. You were supposed to treat my son and every other passenger with basic human decency, regardless of their race, age, or apparent social status. You were supposed to check your ticket, find your assigned seat, and behave like a civilized adult." The passengers around them erupt in whispers, phones coming out to capture this moment of cosmic justice. This isn't just a story anymore. This is the kind of viral moment that will be shared millions of times. The perfect example of why prejudice never pays and assumptions can destroy lives. I didn't know," Karen stammers, but her voice is barely a whisper now. She looks around the cabin at faces that show not sympathy, but anticipation. Everyone is waiting to see what happens next, and none of them are on her side. That's exactly the point. David says, his voice carrying the authority of someone who spent decades fighting prejudice and finally has the perfect, teachable moment. "You didn't know, but you made assumptions anyway. You saw my son and decided he didn't belong here based solely on the color of his skin. You saw me and dismissed me as unimportant before I even spoke. Your ignorance isn't an excuse, it's the entire problem." One of the security officers steps forward with professional courtesy. "Ma'am, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us. You'll be relocated to your assigned seat in economy class, and there will be additional paperwork regarding this incident." Karen's world is crumbling in real time. The other passengers are recording everything, her humiliation being broadcast to the internet at the speed of light. Her LinkedIn profile will be identified within hours. Her employer will see the videos by morning. Her friends, neighbors, family, everyone will know that she's the woman who tried to kick a child out of his first-class seat, only to discover she'd picked a fight with the owner of the airline. This isn't fair. She protests as security helps her gather her designer bags. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know who he was? Anyone can claim to be anyone. But that's exactly the point she keeps missing. She wasn't supposed to know. She was supposed to treat people with basic respect, regardless of their identity, their wealth, or their connections. She was supposed to understand that a black child could belong in first class just as much as anyone else. As Karen is escorted down the aisle toward economy class, past rows of passengers who witnessed her spectacular downfall, Jonathan finally settles into seat 2A, his seat, the one his father purchased for him, the one he'd had every right to occupy from the very beginning. David Miles sits down beside his son in seat 2B, his quiet pride evident as he watches Jonathan handle the aftermath with remarkable maturity. You did beautifully, son. I'm proud of how you stood up for yourself while maintaining your dignity. The applause started slowly, one passenger clapping, then another, then the entire first-class cabin erupting in appreciation, not just for the poetic justice they'd witnessed, but for the grace and dignity both father and son had displayed throughout the ordeal. But the story is far from over. Karen's 15 minutes of infamy are just beginning, and the internet is about to ensure that her prejudice and entitlement follow her for years to come. The look on Karen's face when she realized who she was dealing with was absolutely priceless. But this story isn't over yet. The internet is about to get hold of this, and what happens next will blow your mind. Make sure you're subscribed, because karma isn't finished with her yet. Do you think Karen truly didn't understand the problem with her behavior, even after learning who David Miles was? Or do you think she finally got it, but was just trying to save face? What does it take for people to really change their prejudiced attitudes? The walk of shame down the aircraft aisle is everything you'd imagine and more. Karen, clutching her designer bags like shields against the stares of judgment, makes her way through the cabin as phones track her every step. The passengers in economy class have heard whispers of what happened in first class, and their expressions range from curiosity to outright disgust as she passes. Seat 23B awaits her. Middle seat squashed between a snoring businessman and a college student with noise and selling headphones. No extra legroom, no premium service, no special treatment, just the consequences of her actions served at $35,000 EFT. Meanwhile, real reckoning is happening in cyberspace. The videos are already uploading faster than airline Wi-Fi should technically allow. Story Karen vs. O starts trending within the hour. First-class racism follows close behind. Her face is becoming synonymous with entitled prejudice. A cautionary tale shared millions of times across every social media platform known to humanity. The internet detectives work with frightening efficiency. Within 2 hours, they've identified Karen Wellington, marketing coordinator at a mid-sized consulting firm in Orange County. Her LinkedIn profile reveals a history of posts complaining about diversity initiatives and political correctness gone too far. Her Facebook shows pictures from Trump rallies and shares of articles about traditional values. The pattern is clear, disturbing, and about to become very expensive. Back in first class, David Miles is having a quiet conversation with Jonathan about dignity, character, and the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. The lesson isn't just about racism, it's about how to handle adversity with grace, how to maintain your principles under pressure, and how to recognize that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions of you. Dad, Jonathan asks thoughtfully, why didn't you tell her who you were right away? You could have stopped all of this before it got so ugly. David smiles and puts his arm around his son's shoulders. Because, Jonathan, your worth isn't determined by who your father is or what he owns. You belonged in that seat because you're a human being deserving of respect, not because I'm the Sioux. If I had led with my title, she might have backed down, but she wouldn't have learned anything. And more importantly, you wouldn't have learned that you can stand up for yourself. The flight attendants go out of their way to make their experience exceptional, not because of David's position, but because of how both father and son handled themselves throughout the ordeal. Respect begets respect, and leadership recognizes leadership when it sees it. As the plane begins its descent into New York, David receives a stream of text messages from his communications director. The story is everywhere. CNN is calling. The Today Show wants an interview. Social media is exploding with support for both father and son and condemnation for Karen's behavior. But there's more. Karen's employer has already seen the videos. By the time the plane touches down at JFK, she's been fired. Her company, desperate to distance themselves from the viral racism, releases a statement condemning her actions and reaffirming their commitment to diversity and inclusion. The speed of her professional destruction is breathtaking. Her real estate agent calls to inform her that several potential buyers have withdrawn their offers on her condo after seeing the videos. Her country club is reviewing her membership. Her children's private school is asking uncomfortable questions about her values and their alignment with the institution's principles. The cascade of consequences is swift and merciless. In the age of social media, racism has real costs, financial, social, and professional. Karen is learning that prejudice is an expensive luxury she can no longer afford. Meanwhile, Jonathan is learning different lessons. As they walk through JFK Airport, he notices how people treat his father with respect. Not because they recognize him as a CEO, but because of how he carries himself. David Miles commands respect through competence, kindness, and quiet confidence. He's teaching his son that true power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. "Dad," Jonathan says as they collect their luggage, "I'm glad you let me handle it at first. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought." David's smile is radiant with paternal pride. "You're strong, son. Stronger than that woman will ever be." She thinks strength comes from putting others down, but real strength comes from standing up while helping others stand too. As they climb into their car service, David's phone buzzes with interview requests, speaking engagement offers, and messages of support from business leaders around the world. The incident is being held up as a perfect example of why diversity matters, why assumptions are dangerous, and why character is the ultimate measure of a person's worth. But the most meaningful message comes from Mrs. Patterson, the grandmother from seat 3B. She sent a note through the airline. "Your son is a remarkable young man. You should be proud of the character you're building in him. The world needs more people like both of you." 6 months later, Karen is still struggling to find employment. The videos follow her everywhere. Potential employers Google her name and find the story. Dating apps match her face to the viral videos. She's become a case study in business schools about the dangers of prejudice in the modern world. Meanwhile, Jonathan Miles is thriving. The incident sparked important conversations at his school about prejudice and dignity. He's become a role model for handling adversity with grace. College admission officers are already taking notice of his character and composure. The story becomes more than just viral content. It becomes a teaching tool, a reminder that in our interconnected world, character matters more than ever. Every action has consequences, every word has weight, and every person deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their appearance. As David and Jonathan settle into their New York hotel that evening, father and son reflect on the day's lessons. They've learned that justice, while sometimes delayed, has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it. They've discovered that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. And somewhere in Orange County, Karen Wellington is learning that entitlement and prejudice are luxuries the modern world can no longer afford. And that sometimes when you demand to speak to the manager, the universe gives you exactly what you asked for. If the story of justice served and lessons learned gave you chills and restored your faith in karma, you absolutely must subscribe and share this video. Stories like this need to be told because they remind us that character matters, dignity wins, and prejudice always comes with a price. Your support helps us bring you more incredible tales of justice served. What's the most powerful lesson from this incredible story? Is it that arrogance and prejudice always backfire? That calm dignity is more powerful than anger, that justice has a way of revealing itself at the perfect moment, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us about a time when you witnessed or experienced your own moment of poetic justice. These stories matter, and I read every single comment because your experiences help us all learn and grow.